This tutorial is a quick intro into this annotations drawing that I am providing for you so you can complete your presentation drawings. So in the past, I would show students how to make their own annotations, but it is now common for a lot of firms and schools to just have these annotations available for students to download and to use. But I did want to show you real quick, just give you an overview as to what it is that you're going to be using. So with AutoCAD, the annotations that we use, they are now going to be based on the scale, annotation scale. So if you look down here, the annotation scale that I have right now is set to 1/4 inch. So all the text here is responding to the fact that this is a 1/4 inch scale. If I change the scale here from 1/4 inch and let's say I make it an 1/8 inch, you'll see how the text gets bigger. And that's because when you print drawings out, the smaller the drawing appears on the sheet, the bigger the text has to be to compensate for that change in scale. It's an inverse proportion. Just imagine the box that you see here. If I keep printing it smaller and smaller, the text is also going to get smaller. So the text has to adjust. Now, if I print this drawing at a bigger scale, instead of an 1/8 inch, I increase it to, let's say, 3 inches equals a foot. The text also responds and it does get smaller, but that's because we're going to be looking at the drawing at a much bigger scale. And if the text doesn't adjust, then the text is also going to be huge on that printed drawing. So it has to get smaller. Again, it's an inverse proportion. So keep that in mind. Also, you'll notice that on the side here, there are two icons. This one says to add the scale to the annotative objects when the annotation scale changes. This one here says show the annotation objects. So you need to have these on, and sometimes when you don't, you may not see the annotations in your floating model space viewport. So just keep that in mind. Now, by doing this, I'm going to set this back to 1/4 inch and I'll put it right there. But because I had this turned down where it says add scales to the objects when the scale changes, if I come over here and I'll pick, let's say, this text. And by the way, when you hover over these annotative objects, you're going to see that symbol, that icon that looks like the profile of an architectural scale. And that's letting you know that it's an annotative object. All right. If I click on this annotative object, notice how it's showing me all the different annotative scales. It gets a little difficult to see. And what you can do is you can come over to your properties, and in the properties, you can go to annotative scale, and then you can click right here in the scale that it's showing you. And then this icon appears, which is going to open a dialog box. And when I click on that, this is the um, dialog box I get. And it tells me that it has these three different scales. Well, I just changed them. That's why it's showing them. But I can take the 3 inch equals a foot and I can delete that. I can take 1/8 inch equals a foot and I can delete that and then click OK. And now it's only going to show me the scale for 1/4 inch, which is good. And now if I click here, you'll notice how this still has all the different scales. So keep that in mind. And then you can move them independent of each other, the ghosted images there, because let's say that at one scale you want the text to be at a certain location, but when you change your annotative scale, you want it to be in a different location than where you had the other. That can be taken into consideration. So keep that in mind when it comes to these annotative objects. The leader line here, I won't go into detail about that, but if you do select it, you can come over to the properties. You can see all the different properties. But in order to create these, I went over to Annotate tab, and then from Annotate tab for the leaders, for example, I click on this down arrow, and I created this style called HWC. You're welcome to go in there and click on Modify, and just see how I set this up in terms of what type of a leader I want, the color, line type, all of this, the structure of it, the context or content of it. And the text height is 330 seconds because that's the smallest we ever want to make any text in our drawing files. So leader connections also are already set up, and I can click OK, and I'll close this out. For the dimensions, I also created this style, and if you want to see what that's like, you can go into the Annotate tab, Dimensions panel, and then come right over here to the drop down. And the style that I created is this one called HWC. It has the icon next to it, letting us all know that this is an annotative dimension style. I can click on Modify. When I do that, you'll see the different tabs. And there's a lot going on here in terms of the lines, symbols, and arrows. We use architectural ticks in architecture. The text, I'm using a text style called Dimensions, and I want the text height to be 330 seconds. And I'm able to pick the text style, but I can also go into the text dialog box by clicking on the three dots here. And then that'll tell me the style that I have, and it says dimension. And you'll see that I have that set to annotative. And the paper text height, I have that set to 0 so that when I start using this text style within my dimension style, it will default to 330 seconds. And then this will adjust according to the annotative scale. So I'll cancel out of that. I'm sorry, let's go to fit. Just take a look at this, what it's telling you. And every time you make a change, you'll be able to see the updates happening in the preview here. Under primary units, this is similar to setting up your units. And this is why I had you set your architectural units to the nearest 32nd of an inch so that we could set a lot of values of our architectural tick marks and text heights to a 32nd of an inch precision. So it was all part of that. And then when you go to alternate units, there's nothing that we do here. Same thing with tolerance. This is more for machine drawings, engineering drawings. And the alternate units is if you are working with decimal along with imperial units. Let's say you're doing a project where both are required. This is where you would address that, but we're not doing that. So take a look at these. These are your dimension styles now to keep. Same thing with the textile. This whole annotation drawing is yours. Use it for future drawings. And then finally, I have this title in here, and this title is based on it's an it's a block, and it's an attribute block. Um, and I assembled it for you, and I'm going to right click and go to block editor, and I want you to see that these here where it says title and scale, these are attribute definitions. It's a way of being able to put in a placeholder, if you will, and then letting the user pick what should be put into it. You can see I have some the actions and some parameters in place here. I have some visibility settings, so I'm just going to close this for a moment. If you click on the block itself, let me change the properties here so that I can adjust the annotative scale and remove the other scales and just keep the 1/4 inch scale like this. And now you can take this arrow, drag it across, make it any size you want. Where it says plan view, you can double click on that. When you double click, you're going to get this enhanced attribute editor. And instead of plan view, you can call this elevation. And we use all caps in architecture. You can click on that. If the scale is different than a 1/4 inch, you would double click on that also. And instead of 1/4 inch, you can go 1/8 inch. Click OK. The arrow, if north is not pointing up in a plan view or your site plan view, I set it up so you can take this arrow and you can rotate it at a 45-degree increment. I provided 2 different arrow types. So this is showing title only. When you do your elevations, they don't have a north arrow. When you do your floor plans and your site plans, they will need a north arrow. So you can pick north arrow 1 or you can pick north arrow 2, whichever one you prefer, and adjust. And usually north, if it's not pointing up, it will then point to the left. Very rarely do we have north pointing down or to our right. So that's the intro to this HWC annotation drawing. Download it, it'll be available, and use it when you add annotations to your presentation files. Okay, thanks.